Hi everyone, this is Paul here for the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm doing the astrology report for the week commencing the 7th of March, highlighting some of the key transits taking place this week along some important aspects and outlining what these mean for us so that we can make best use of the energies available this week. Now before I go into the actual aspects and transits, as usual I just want to clarify that astrology doesn't control us in any way or doesn't control the outcomes of our lives. It just gives us a map or an understanding of what the energies around us are doing, what themes and lessons are highlighting for us to learn, so we can then make best use of the energy and go more with the flow or the natural flow of energy rather than trying to force things to happen our way, which may not be in our best interest in the long run. So as usual, start off with the transits of the moon. So we begin with the moon in Scorpio, and this is a time of emotion. We may feel all those old hurts or old emotional patterns surfacing, and this gives us an opportunity to release the past. Then later on Wednesday itself, the moon will enter Sagittarius, and this is a time for us to explore new ideas, explore new philosophies or new ways of being, look at new visions that we may want to manifest, or look at things from a more transpersonal perspective. And then on Saturday the moon will enter Capricorn, and this will be a time for becoming very practical and grounded and looking at how can we implement the ideas and visions that we get in Sagittarius. What can we do to take practical steps to test these ideas and see what happens, or see if they're actually realistic or if they need fine-tuning. And then on Monday the moon will then move into Aquarius, and this will bring a focus on community and looking at how we relate or how we operate within our communities, how we can work together towards an objective or towards a shared goal with one another, and just focusing on that sense of, or that feeling, that connection to one another, and understanding that we're all interconnected in one way or another. Everything that we do has an effect on others, so it's worth being conscious of our actions and looking to see how we can work with others to create communities that foster each other's growth but don't force people down certain routes. Now in terms of key aspects, we have Venus is changing signs. She's coming out of Pisces into Aries. This is a time for where we may value greater objectivity in our relationships, but we may also value greater freedom or personal autonomy. So this may be a time where in our relationships we may feel that need to be ourselves, or have a sense of relationships that foster our own independence and also helping to foster that with the other person. So this is a time where we may value autonomy, value taking action, and value objectivity rather than because Venus has been in Pisces and it's been that value and that sense of oneness or achieving the transcendent perspective. But with Venus now coming back to the start of the zodiac, we may value that as relationships that foster independence, foster autonomy, and also foster respect for each other for who we are rather than who we could be or what we think each person should be. So it's that need or that demand to be loved and respected for who we are as individuals rather than just going with the flow or allowing people to tell us who we should be or influence who we should be. So relationships may become more direct or may become more objective through that need to honour the self and making sure that we don't give up or we don't end up becoming something that we're not, because we're more interested in keeping the other person happy or avoiding conflict rather than being true to who we are and making sure that each person is honoured equally in the relationship. Now the key date this week will be on Friday the 9th. So for two reasons. One of them is that Jupiter is going retrograde in Scorpio, so this is going to start a 4-month period where we may not feel as much expansive energy as we do normally. We may feel that all the energy that we were committing to goals and stuff like that, or spreading ourselves too thin, is now being withdrawn, and we now have to reevaluate what goals we're setting, and also reevaluate the power dynamics we have with one another, and making sure that what we're doing is actually mutually empowering, mutually beneficial, because Scorpio is about the sharing of resources, and it's about learning to honour one another and letting the personal ego die in order for us to be reborn into more transpersonal consciousness. So with Jupiter in Scorpio and Jupiter being retrograde, this is a time where we may feel the need to reevaluate our projects, or reevaluate whatever goals and visions we're initiating, and making sure they're actually right for who we are. Because with Jupiter retrograde, it's a period where the ego's energy, or the ego, is brought back into control, or is ideally restrained by the soul, because wanting to make sure that whatever goals we're setting, or whatever projects we're doing, are actually right for who we are, and actually honour our own beliefs. Because when Jupiter's direct, one thing we can be susceptible to is going with the crowd and following what everyone else is doing, not because we necessarily think it's right, but we may fear reprisals or fear the judgment of others if we don't go along with what everyone else is doing. When Jupiter's retrograde, it asks us to go inwards and check ourselves, check what we're doing against our own personal beliefs, our own inner compass, our own personal code of ethics, and evaluate things very clearly and very closely to see, is what we're doing actually right for who we are? Are we actually being true to who we are and letting other people see who we are? Or are we pretending to be something that we're not in order to fit in? Are we going along with something that we don't actually agree with in our heart of hearts, but we still do it because we'd rather go with the crowd rather than honour who we are and have the courage to not engage in something that isn't beneficial or won't empower us and may actually disempower the other person as well. So, and this is also going to be a period with Jupiter being in Scorpio. We also need to look at our own personal power dynamics and also see, where do we still hold on to old attachments and old emotional pain, and where do we allow that to fester in resentment, anger and judgment. And it's when what we really need to be doing is practicing forgiveness, so that we reclaim our power back from the past, and we no longer require or no longer feel like we have to hold on to resentment in order to feel powerful. Because Scorpio is our relationship with power, and at its highest level, Scorpio teaches that true power lies at the core of who we are, but can only be tapped into when we break through the layers of illusion that our ego builds, and we connect with the power in a way that, and seek to use it in a way that's mutually empowering. So we don't just use it for personal gain. We recognise the need to show other people or help other people to empower themselves so that they can take greater charge of their lives, achieve greater personal freedom, and that person is then freed from shackles of the past. But if we don't do the work on ourselves, we can't realistically expect anyone else to do that themselves, because otherwise that's just being hypocritical. We can't expect someone else to do something if we're ourselves not prepared to do it. Now, the other thing on that day is that Mercury is going to enter his pre-retrograde shadow. So this, with Mercury retrograde at the end of the month, the shadow is a period of slowing down ahead of the actual retrograde, and this is where we may start seeing some of the classic signs we associate with Mercury retrograde, like miscommunication, not seeing things clearly, maybe problem with electric goods, problems with the way we say things or how people interpret it. So with Mercury entering the shadow, this is a period where if we can consciously slow down and start, rather than relying on logic all the time, allow the intuition or the intuitive side to come through as well, so that we take the blinkers off and we start seeing the wider picture. So, and with Mercury being retrograde entirely within the sign of Aries, what we're being asked to become more aware of is who our own personal sense of who we are, so our sense of self-identity, but also to it be a period of re-evaluating our actions and desires and making sure that the actions and desires we're pursuing are actually right for who we are. They're not just a product of the ego. They're not just going for temporary pleasures or instant gratification. We're looking at what actions do we need to take from a longer perspective, and from a wider perspective. So what, understanding how our actions create consequences, because we're free to take whatever actions or make any choice we make, but we're not free from the consequences of those choices and those actions. So if we want our actions and choices to reflect well or to bring about desired results, then we need to become conscious of what the consequences are of certain courses of action, so we don't make the mistake of doing something that isn't beneficial in the long run, isn't going to lead to any greater growth or any greater results, and may actually sting us or undermine our efforts. Because this is the Mercury retrograde takes place when the Sun enters Aries, so it would be a time of ordinarily initiating a lot of new beginnings, but with Mercury going retrograde, we're being warned against rushing ahead blindly and planting things before we know the full picture. So whatever goals, with it being in Aries as well, we could be looking at the goals we set and looking at whatever actions that we normally take, and looking to see, is there a wiser course of action we can take instead? Is there a better way and more honest way of achieving the same results that we want to achieve based on our goals? So it's becoming more aware of other ways of doing things, so we're not just following old patterns of behaviour. We're looking at how can we do things in a new way that is more effective, but is also more honest and less likely to generate any karma for ourselves, because we're not thinking about the wider repercussions of our actions. We're just looking at temporary or immediate gains or immediate gratification, but not realising that that immediate gratification can prevent us from achieving something more worthwhile in the long run that requires more patience, more self-discipline, self-control. So that's, with Mercury entering the pre-retrograde shadow, things will start happening around us which may prompt us to start slowing down. The more we consciously slow down and focus on awareness rather than attention, i.e. looking at how everything connects with the big picture rather than using blinkered vision and focusing on what's immediately in front of us, if we take that step back and look at things from a broader perspective, we may notice other opportunities to achieve the same result that we haven't noticed. And by slowing down before the retrograde, we put ourselves in a good position to make the best use of the retrograde in a constructive way, where we can learn more about ourselves, achieve greater self-awareness, and more likely to achieve the goals we want to set for ourselves. So I hope that's a useful gauge for the week. There's quite a bit to take on board, but most of the key date is going to be the 9th, when we have Jupiter retrograde and Mercury entering the pre-retrograde shadow ahead of the 23rd of March. So there's a fair bit to take on board there, but the main takeaway is we need to look at slowing down and not trying to rush ahead, not trying to force the issue or trying to make things happen before the right time. It's a period of slowing down and looking at seeing or identifying what is the wisest course of action. So the Sun's in Pisces at the moment still, and will be for another week or two. So this is a time for remembering to slow down, to spend time in a bit of solitude, just to pay attention to what we need to let go of, because we're still in a period where we're tying up old ends as well. So we need to be slowing down and making sure that we get rid of anything in our lives, whether it be thought patterns, emotional patterns, old attachments which served us well for a period but no longer help us and will actually undermine any future goals we set if we don't let go of these attachments. So this is a week of slowing down and reflecting, of making sure that we remove or release the things which don't serve us anymore and that will only serve to undermine our future efforts towards new goals. So the more we can turn inwards and evaluate carefully what it is that we truly want to create and what are we holding on to at the moment that is going to undermine our efforts to create the goals we decide to achieve. So if we use this week to reflect and let go of what no longer serves us, we can create much greater space in our lives, and we can conduct ourselves with greater wisdom and objectivity, so that whatever actions we take towards the goals we want to achieve on the Cementer's Aries, we know that the actions are objective, they're guided by wisdom, not just blind impulse, and it's going to help us to achieve our goals without generating unnecessary calm for ourselves. So Hertz use guide for the week, may bring you much growth, many blessings, and a whole lot of greater awareness and personal freedom through releasing the past. So take care, be blessed.